Hey there, and welcome to this explainer. Have you ever found yourself wondering why world events seem to unfold the way they do? It's almost like they're following some sort of invisible script, regardless of who is actually sitting in the seat of power. Well, today, we're going to demystify those hidden forces. We're exploring Kenneth Waltz's absolutely massively influential systems theory on political structures. We're going to take some pretty complex political science and break it down into clear, easy-to-grasp concepts that will take us straight to the core of how global politics actually operates.
So here is our roadmap for today. We're going to cover beyond the individual leaders, what is a structure, domestic politics, organized hierarchy, international politics, global anarchy, and we'll wrap it all up with the market of nations.
All right, let's just dive right into Section 1, Beyond the Individual Leaders.
I want to hook you right out of the gate by challenging something we basically all do. Whenever there's a huge international crisis or a major policy shift, what's our first instinct? We immediately praise or blame the individual leader's personality, right? We say things like, oh, they're so bold, or they're incredibly weak, or what a brilliant strategist. But the source material for our explainer today asks us to look quite a bit deeper. Think about this. What if the personality of the leader is just a tiny, almost irrelevant piece of a much, much larger puzzle?
To really ground this theory in reality, let's look at a comparison straight from the text. Think about the American president on one hand and the British prime minister on the other. Now, the American president enjoys an independent tenure and operates within a system defined by the separation of powers. They can lead, they can make demands of Congress, and honestly, even if Congress says a flat-out no, the president is still the president. On the flip side, the British prime minister's power relies entirely on the fusion of powers and absolute, total dependence on their party's support. If they lose that support, they lose their job, sometimes literally overnight, which we've seen happen quite a bit lately. These incredibly different domestic setups heavily constrain how a leader can behave, and that's entirely regardless of whether they personally happen to be timid or super aggressive. Which brings us to a quote from the text that just hits the nail on the head. Because of the structure we just talked about, a UK Prime Minister cannot just act as a rogue, bold visionary if that vision alienates their party. They have to crawl along cautiously. They literally must prioritize party unity just to survive politically. The system completely overrides the individual's personality. The structure shapes the behavior, demanding an expert party manager, not a maverick.
Okay, so if the individual leaders and their personalities aren't the main drivers here, what exactly are? That takes us to Section 2, what is a structure? Imagine a reductionist view of the world, where you just have states interacting directly with one another. A interacts with B, B interacts with C. Honestly, this is how most people view international politics. It's like a giant game of billiards. But Waltz argues that this picture is entirely incomplete. By looking only at the states and their direct one-on-one interactions, we completely miss the invisible forces, the structure, that is quietly guiding and limiting every single thing they do.
But here is the real visual aha moment. Think about the difference when you drop an organizational structure into the mix. The states are still interacting, sure, but now imagine a circle enclosing them. That circle represents the system itself. And that system acts as a powerful organizational constraint. It fundamentally alters the interactions of the states inside it. You simply cannot understand why states act the way they do unless you acknowledge that invisible circle, that structure surrounding them.
So, how do we actually go about defining this invisible structure? Our source material gives us a super elegant three-part checklist. 1. The ordering principle. Basically, how are the parts arranged? 2. The character of the units. What do the individual parts actually do? And 3. The distribution of capabilities. Who really holds the power? This simple little checklist is going to be our rubric for the rest of this explainer. Definitely keep these 3 steps in the back of your mind.
Let's take that rubric for a spin right now. In Section 3, Domestic Politics, Organized Hierarchy, we're going to start by applying this rule to the domestic level, since it's an environment we all basically understand intuitively.
Step 1 is the ordering principle. And on the home front, domestically, that principle is hierarchy. What does that actually mean in plain English? It means that the system is ordered by relations of super and subordination. Simply put, someone is legally entitled to command, like a president, a prime minister, or a judge, and others are legally required to obey. There's a very clear, defined chain of command.
Step 2 is the character of the units. In a domestic hierarchy, the units are incredibly differentiated. Think about it. They are formally split up to perform very distinct, highly specialized tasks. Congress makes the laws, the executive branch enforces them, and various agencies administer them. You would never ask the Department of Agriculture to command the military, right? The units are totally different from one another because the security of a hierarchy allows for that intense specialization.
All right, let's keep building on this and do a massive zoom out for Section 4, International Politics, Global Anarchy. We're leaving the domestic sphere behind and stepping right onto the global stage.
Going back to step 1 of our rubric, the ordering principle. Globally, the ordering principle is not hierarchy, it's anarchy. Now, we need to completely redefine the word anarchy for our purposes here. We usually think of anarchy as total chaos, rioting in the streets, just complete disorder. But in political structure, anarchy simply means the absence of agents with system-wide authority. There is no global CEO. There's no world government that can magically force a superpower to do something it really doesn't want to do. It's a system of formal equality where no one is automatically entitled to command anyone else.
So the really crucial point here is how this anarchy completely flips step 2, the character of the units. Domestically, remember, units were super specialized, but globally, under anarchy, states are what Waltz calls like units. Internally, sure, states are wildly different. Some are massive democracies, some are tiny dictatorships. But externally, functionally, they are totally undifferentiated. Why? Because without a world government to protect them, every single sovereign state has to perform the exact same basic tasks. Every state has to collect taxes, maintain an economy, and above all else, defend itself. Costa Rica and the United States are obviously vastly different in size, but structurally, they are both sovereign entities duplicating the exact same core survival activities.
Let's recap this 3-part definition on the global scale just to lock it all in. The ordering principle is anarchy, no higher authority. The character of the units is undifferentiated. They're all sovereign, self-reliant, like units. So if those first 2 parts of the structure basically never change, what actually drives the massive shifts we see in global politics? Well, that brings us to step 3, the distribution of capabilities. This is the big variable. Changes in the international system happen primarily when there are shifts in who holds the actual power. When a new great power rises up or an old one falls, the entire structure shifts, which completely changes the expectations of how all the units are going to behave.
To really cement how this invisible anarchic structure operates, let's move to our final section, the market of nations. We're going to bridge some pretty dense political theory with microeconomic concepts you're probably already familiar with.
This analogy brilliantly illustrates the core dynamic we're talking about here. Think of firms in a decentralized economic market. No single company controls the whole market, right? The order is spontaneously generated by everyone acting in their own self-interest to seek a profit. That market creates an invisible structure that absolutely forces companies to compete and improve, or else they die. Now compare that to states in the world. No single state controls the globe. The order is spontaneously generated by states seeking security. Just as the free market forces companies to compete, global anarchy forces nations into a rigid system of self-help.
And why does this matter so much? It all comes down to this foundational reality. Survival is a prerequisite to achieving any goals that states may have. Think back to that business analogy. A company might want to create the most innovative product in the world, or have the absolute best employee benefits. But if it goes bankrupt, it can't do any of those things. Avoiding bankruptcy is step 1. Similarly, a state might want to promote human rights globally, or conquer the world, or honestly, just be left alone in peace. But none of that matters if the state ceases to exist. The anarchic structure forces states to secure their own survival first and foremost before literally any other ideological goals can be pursued. What is truly wild about all of this is that the leaders, they don't even have to fully understand the rules of the game they're playing. The international structure naturally selects for success. It acts just like an evolutionary force. States that adopt successful practices, like building strong alliances or maintaining a robust defense, are rewarded by the structure. They survive and they prosper. States that ignore the realities of anarchy and fail to protect themselves, they are punished by the structure. They lose power or they just get absorbed. You don't have to be a genius. The system will simply weed out the behaviors that don't conform to the harsh reality of self-help.
I want to leave you with this final, really provocative thought to wrap up our explainer today. The game one has to win is defined by the structure that determines the kind of player who is likely to prosper. We spend so much time watching the news, obsessing over the speeches, the unique personalities, and the individual decisions of world leaders. But after looking at this framework today, we really have to ask ourselves, are those presidents and prime ministers truly pulling the strings of global events, or is the invisible structure of the international system, the anarchy, the distribution of capabilities, the sheer absolute necessity of survival, the real puppet master? Thank you so much for learning with me today, and always keep looking for the structure behind the story.